still trying to,
I'm sorry.
Mike McKenzie is still trying to connect, I guess, or I don't see him on my screen.
Not yet. Okay. Well, let's start with just a moment of silence while we wait, kind of gather our thoughts. We have a lot to cover here, and let's do it for the common good all the way around. So take a moment. Thank you all for being here. We have open session, and we've got Mike and Mary Jane and Mary. Anybody wanting to take 3 minutes to go on record here? Mary.
Yes, I would like to just put out share something that happened during the ferry outage. And on Saturday, the 31st of July, when it was the unexpected one, when my husband Jim had a very urgent need to get into the ER shortly after the outage happened. It wasn't urgent enough to make it feasible to call the helicopter, but if it had lasted much longer, it probably would have become that way. So we called the EMS services. They responded and they tried to see if they could do another run with the chief. It couldn't happen. They had enough trouble trying to pull the boat into the dock. When we got down to the ferry, I saw the boat sideways into the dock, so they were trying to get in. What happened is we were able, fortunately, Chris Immer was transporting some family and guests over to the island, and we were able to get off the island, walking down the riprap, and got onto Chris's boat over to the other side. We were met by an aid car over there. Jim was taken to the hospital and his problem was resolved and he's okay. The thing that I'm most concerned about, it just really became a very strong, powerful moment for me to realize how much our island needs to have a community dock where people can get a regular boat in to get people off the island at times of a ferry outage, especially in an emergency outage like that. That just was, it was just kind of a perfect storm sort of a thing. And at the same time, I had like 24 guests here for dinner that night. And some of them had to get off the island. One of them was unable to climb down the riprap. I have a friend down the street who was able to get her to the other side. But, you know, that just really made it very clear to me. And I spoke on Saturday with County Executive Sidhu, with Todd Donovan, with Roland Middleton, with John Hutchings, and a couple of the LIFAC members that listened. And I just want to just state and put on the record that Lummi Island needs to have a community dock or some sort of a way to evacuate people that are not in non-life threatening situations in the event of a ferry outage. Walking down the riprap is not acceptable or safe. I was just very thankful that Chris was able to do that. But I think we as a community need to come together and either approach the Port of Bellingham or the county to advocate for a public dock that a recreational boat could tie up to in an emergency to get people off the island. There's a lot of people that do have boats, but you know, it's not always easy to get people off of a beach or something like that. And I think that we need to have a contingency plan. Last night, I brought this forward with LIFAC, and LIFAC is going to form a committee to get people that are interested in pursuing this together. And, you know, so that's like what I want to say. I want to say that, and I would love LIFAC's cooperation on it. And I would like to work together with anybody that is interested in pursuing this. But I think it's something that can't wait for 5 years until the new ferry docks are in and designed. I know that there is like a public loading, a side loading ramp that's put into the plans, but I don't know if that's going to be something that would be accessible by a small boat in an emergency. So I don't know, but I'm not sure where or how it's going to get going, but I think that I am asking the community to come together, if there's other people that feel the way I do, to watch for some stuff on the LIFAC website and anything else, to try to get something started. That's all.
Well,
And I didn't have time to write anything, and I will write something up.
I appreciate your starting with LIFAC and pursuing many venues or possibilities. Yes, Judy.
Mary, I'm just wondering, did you trip the EMS system by calling 911, or did you stay away from that system?
No, I did call 911 because when I found out the ferry was down, I knew that the only way off the island is via helicopter. Jim and I have airlift insurance, but I was told by Michael that they really, you know, can't call unless it's like life-threatening at that time for the helicopter. And so I could have easily driven Jim to the emergency room, and if the ferry was running, EMS would have put me at the front of the line, because there was a really long line that had already formed, but and they could have helped me in that way. But you know,
Mary,
can
I ask you a quick question? I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm taking a lot of notes, and I'm feeling terrible that all happened to you guys. It's an inopportune time.
Yeah.
But because we do also at times, or EMS services do at times use the Bellingham Fire Department fireboat. I'm just wondering if that was ever offered to you at any time during any of that.
No.
Okay.
No. That could have been helpful, but where would I have met them? Because it was also, the other thing was like nature was not helping out. It was an extremely low tide. And so where would
that boat comes
fireboat have been able to land?
Scenic Estates dock. That's where they've typically done it before.
It comes here.
I'm just curious if that's or not.
No, it was not offered, and I would have taken that. I think I would have taken anything. I was, yeah.
I've seen it come to our dock. The other thing is, Mary, you were totally correct. And this is not just, and the population of our island is getting up there. And this is going to be more and more of an issue as we go on. So I think that's a really valid point. And I know that Chris, after his that weekend, said he was going to really pursue getting a dock also. So
Right. And
Mary,
I'll be
right to
quiet.
support.
Mary, I just think this was terrible what happened to you and Jim, and I'm very sorry. Can you tell us what the county executive said when you raised this with him?
He said that was, it was he was sorry that that had happened, and that he thought it was important. And I just said, I said to him that I am an active person in my community, and that I am going to try to organize to talk to the county council, to talk to, whoever I need to talk to get something moving on this, because we need it now, not 5 years from now.
I always thought that having John back on the island would help us, but I'm not so sure it is all the time.
Oh.
So I think we really need to pursue that. You guys as a group, and I will personally, but pursue that, to really get him to get it. And he will get it when it happens to his folks. I mean, he will.
Mary
Mary,
Jane, can I ask,
I
just a second, Charles, Mary Jane, do you know what the rules are on using the scenic estates dock? I don't know.
No, well, you're supposed to be a scenic estates member, which of course I'm not because I'm a renter, but they're pretty flexible. If somebody comes in, they're only watching to be sure that you're not leaving your boat out there all the time.
I see.
As far as I know, you need to talk to Cash, but he's your man.
Okay. Charles.
Yeah, I had two ideas. The short run, the old ferry dock used to be right across from the Beach Store Cafe where the park is now. So the county presumably could put something there which wouldn't require them acquiring expensive shoreline. The others, that could happen more quickly than the new terminal, which will have to come with the new ferry. But I think that maybe we should pursue both. The short run, getting some kind of a dock in that location, and in the longer term, ensuring that the new terminal is constructed so that in an emergency, boats could pull up to some side of it and people could walk on.
Thank you. Jim, you had your hand up.
Well, after just coming back from the world's largest unreligious convention and biggest aviation, I think Lummi Island needs an emergency airfield. And there is a group, several groups affiliated with the American Pilots Association and the Experimental Aircraft Association, who do these kind of lifts for people, absolutely free of charge. And if you have an emergency like that, they will fly in with something like a Cessna 182 or something, larger, small plane, and take you to town. And I think that as the only pseudo county group or what do you want to call it, registered county group on the island, that might be something in a later time that we might look at. I don't mean an airfield so that Gulfstream 2s could go to the Willows could come in, but one that was purely a local operation for Lummi Island. And it seemed to me we got quite a bit of a stash of park money sitting away, and it might be a great place to, get a field, and you could go play with your dog there, whatever else you want to do, and actually have a runway, let's say, 2,000 feet would be really nice. And we're the only island in the San Juan groups that does not have an operating airfield.
Oh.
Field was never a good one. I know I went in and out of there several hundred times, and it would require quite a bit of tree removal on the neighbors, which don't want to do it.
Okay. Well, Jim, thank you for adding that. That's another avenue to explore, and obviously this needs attention. And Mary, let us know specifically how LIFAC can help move it forward going on an ongoing basis. So I appreciate that. Any other public comments?
Mary, do you know who the members of the committee were that were set up at the LIFA?
So far it's myself. I am going to chair it. Bill Daly and Greg Hall, who's the LIFAC president, they're all interested, and I am going to try to write a article to put in the tome, put on the LIFAC website, and invite the community, anybody in the community that is interested to contact me, and then I will set up some Zoom meetings. The thing that Paul Davis brought up is that Lummi Island is also the only island with major population that does not have a public dock. All the other ones where there are full-time residents have some sort of a public dock facility. So that can be, people can walk off. So that is awesome. That is also kind of another, to go with what Jim says about an airfield too.
Okay.
And I would think Parks and Recs is a good place to explore that.
So,
Excellent.
Mary, a couple of times you said LIFAC, but I think you meant LICA.
Yes, Leica. Yeah, Leica. I thank you. Yeah, there's too many lies in this island.
Got it.
Okay, Charles, last comment.
Yeah, I have a question for Jim Dickinson. Jim, do you know about Village Point Marina? With the house there has a dock, or anyway, something like a drawbridge that I guess was designed to allow boats to come up alongside, but I've never seen it used. Is that a possibility, or do you know anything about it?
You have to have the float in, and they haven't put the float in for probably 5 years since Mark.
Oh, I see. Do they have a float somewhere?
They used to have one. I'm not sure where it is now. Sitting in the back there somewhere.
But that wouldn't help it in the wintertime, presumably, when the water is very rough there.
You might be able, it would, if you could get a boat down there that you could set that thing on, you might be able to set it on, but it better be really stable. The other thing I was gonna mention was, as far as the EMS service has the ability to commandeer facilities in an emergency. It's the same thing as what's known as the safe harbor. If you have a harbor there and there's a big storm, if somebody wants to anchor, you can't stop them. The same basic
Okay,
rights.
good news.
Got one more.
Okay, Tom.
Sunset Beach, just below us here, is owned by the county. And I think that could be in fact, it's run, I think, by Park and Rec, although we don't see much of their presence. But Terry is the one from the island here that's the main person in Park and Rec.
I didn't know that. Okay. All right. No more comments to bring forward. Let's move on to approval of the July meeting minutes. Thank you, Judy, for taking a run at those, and motion to approve.
I move we approve.
Thank you. A second.
A second.
Thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
By consensus. Thank you. And I guess nobody's officially taking minutes. I'm taking notes, but
I'm taking notes too.
Okay, Charles, if you can take a run at we'll cobble it together. I appreciate that, Charles. And thank you for doing it last month, Judy.
I'm scribbling notes too, so we can collaborate.
Great. Okay. LIFAC internal business. I know in the last meeting, there was discussion about continuing our LIFAC meetings on Zoom or going to a hybrid in-person option. I am going to suggest we table that discussion till next month, until we see what happens with this Delta variant. Any other discussion on that suggestion?
I agree. I think
agree.
it's prudent to wait.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we will do Zoom again in September.
I would suggest we plan to do Zoom in September.
Okay.
And then
And then pick the subject up on that
And
agenda to take stock and so forth.
absolutely. Jim, are you comfortable with that?
Oh, I'd rather have a real meeting, but
I read you're on record in those minutes we just approved. You and Mike McKenzie both were hoping for in person also, but we'll revisit it actively again next month. Any other internal business to bring forward? Okay, old business. Rich, you want to bring us up to date? Let's start with Santa Can. Any movement on that? And how is that Santa Can on Gooseberry Point doing? Is it surviving? I can't hear you.
There, can you hear me now?
Yep, thank you.
Sorry, I've been a little banged up because of my back and some back surgery I had. So I haven't been off the island at all in quite a while. But the last time I checked on it, which I was doing quite frequently, is it seemed a little messy one morning on my way into town, and then on the way back from town, I checked on it and it had been all cleaned up. And it seemed to me like it was going well. It seemed to me like it was being pretty well taken care of and not too terribly abused. Is that everybody's sort of take on it as well?
I haven't heard different
Anybody
things.
used it?
I haven't used it
Okay.
very often. It was fine the 1 or 2 times I used it. It was fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool.
Keep an eye on it.
Yeah, you got it. The weather station, I believe that's still ongoing. I think Mike Skihan is still pursuing funds with crew member John Mulhern.
I think Mike McKenzie.
Sorry, Mike McKenzie. I'm sorry, Mike McKenzie. And I'm not sure where that is right now. It sounds like they're still working on it and it's ongoing. So as far as the ferry employee schedule request, I broached this subject with our assistant director, Elizabeth Cosa, and she said that's a hard no. For reasons of privacy and safety, we don't openly share identity or the comings and goings of our crew members. Again, like I think I've been asked this, which is fine, been asked in the past about the crew wearing name tags and that sort of thing. It's also why we don't pursue that. And also it's okay to just, if there's a crew member you want to know, to introduce yourself to that crew member. If you have a bad experience with a crew member, well then I'm the phone call you need to make so I can determine who is working at that time.
And can I pause and just say that's a request that came from Mary Jane, and Mary Jane, at the root of that request, what were you needing that you're not getting? Other than
There was a time, well, I have had a problem with one particular crew member, but there was a time when somebody posted the names of people. It's just for those of us that travel all the time, and now that I'm not traveling every day, it would just really be nice to know, put a name with a face. And I know, and right now there have been a lot of change. Seems like there are new people showing up all the time, and particularly when there are 3 people. And as I said, I'm not going every day like I used to. So yeah, it's me whining. Sorry.
Well,
Okay.
You're not whining, and can I say, Mary Jane, that it's I had a really a similar comment from the person that actually hired me on the ferry, Don Hayes, 25 years ago. He was riding on the ferry, and one of our new deckhands, Mike Hammis, was motioning him forward, and Don was doing a good job, and Don's getting a little older, and Mike kind of patted him on the shoulder and said, way to go, you did a great job. And Don did not like that interaction very much.
So you and I have talked about this before, and then Tom put a thing with names, but it'd be really nice to see faces. And that,
Yeah,
and
Tom.
that thing that Tom did was like 2 years ago or something.
Yeah, Tom got a talking to about that, and he won't be doing
Oh,
that.
sorry. I'm so sorry I brought that up. Oh,
Okay.
That's okay, Tom. Tom, as everything Tom does, it was with great intent and
oh yeah.
and totally
Okay.
heartfelt. But yeah, the crew members, the majority of them, they're not into it. And again, I mean, I know it's kind of difficult, but I mean, I get what you're saying. It would feel really nice to just sort of have like this roster of with a face and a name, but unless they all collectively want to do it, I can't make them.
Well, wait a minute. The fire department has a list, no faces, but the fire department does.
Yeah, fire. Well, it's well.
That's a whole different deal. I know. I'm already talking to them too. So.
Okay. All right.
You know.
Thank you for addressing it though. Okay.
Sorry. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rich.
Okay,
No worries.
dry dock planning.
Dry dock planning. So everything's on schedule. You can expect to see all the normal information coming out by the end of this week. That includes passenger vessel schedule, bus schedule, parking map, the coming in and out of service times. One thing which I believe is noteworthy is that on Saturday, on September 11th, on Saturday morning, when you all wake up, myself included, because I'll be on the island, when you wake up on Saturday morning, there will be no ferry service of any kind until the passenger vessel gets up and running about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And again, that'll all come out this week, and we'll be sure to highlight that. However, when we do come back in service from Seattle, there will be a passenger vessel still currently here providing service throughout the morning hours. And then, the changeover will occur, and the Whatcom Chief will be back in service by about 8 p.m. on October 2nd. So want to make sure that that's noted. The capital work that we have scheduled and programmed for the Gooseberry Point dock, which is the sandblasting and painting, that's all on schedule. We don't anticipate any service disruption at all because of that work. I think it's going to be noisy and nasty and not pleasant, just like it was last year, but we should be able to keep the passenger boat up and running on schedule.
So we haven't seen the van schedule, so it'll start on Friday or Thursday.
Yeah, I believe that it's just as it is every year. The van I believe will start running the day before dry dock begins. So the van would start running on the 10th. But
Okay,
cool. I'd have to reread that and look again. It's all going to be coming this week.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks.
I have a quick question. The impact of
Sure.
the sinkhole with the road closure, how's that going to impact the dry dock van, or will that sinkhole be repaired and will West Shore be open by dry dock?
I am actually involved in a Good question. I'm going to be at a pre-construction meeting on site Monday morning with the contractor, and we're wishing that the sinkhole will be fixed before dry dock. So that's a piece of good news.
Yep.
Yay.
Okay. I know, yay, right? Also noteworthy, Gary Poole is going to be taking my position as on-site representative for the county at the shipyard this year. I had back surgery. I can't be conducting my duties as I normally would down there, which includes a lot of crawling around with the Coast Guard close behind me. So Gary's going to be doing that. He's going to be the eyes and ears of Whatcom County Public Works. I will still be supporting from the island. I'll be still responsible for signing off on all the paperwork and all that business, but Gary's going to be our eyes and ears down there.
Great. Does he have an official title that I should be aware of?
He does. He is. So I am, as corny as it sounds, my official title is Senior Master. Gary's title is Engineer, Master Engineer, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I don't think it sounds corny at all. But anyway,
No, sounds good.
Thank
And
you.
do we need?
Every once in a while, I get a giggle.
I see.
I put emergency outage planning here on the agenda, and I would like to keep it on there from a public works standpoint as well.
Yeah.
If you can do that. Do you have any comments
I can.
based on Mary's input earlier?
Well, the only thing I can comment on is the way in which Public Works does business. I'd also like to, which, that doesn't mean that things can't change. I just want to bring everybody sort of up to speed where we currently are with all of that. I'm sure Sat Paul and John probably stated some similar things, but I also wanted to go through in particular the events that occurred on that day and let you all know exactly what happened and then what the follow-up was to help ensure that nothing like that happens again for as long as it happened. So if you're interested, I can give you that narrative.
Please.
Yeah, we would like to hear it.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I got a phone call, and I should have written down times. I cannot remember exactly what time this was. I believe it was right around 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., somewhere in there. But that from Captain Kent Dixon on his approach to the Lummi Island dock had lost his number one end rudder. And so when we're, just for your education, when we're talking about the Whatcom Chief or any double-ended ferry boat, we always choose a number one end and a number two end to refer to things. And so the number one end for you all is the end that faces Lummi Island. The number two end is the end that faces Gooseberry Point. So at any rate, at around 2 o'clock, Captain Kent Dixon was making an approach to the Lummi Island dock. He lost the number one end rudder, which meant it was just, when we lose it, it means it goes non-responsive and it goes hard over and you can't move it. It fails usually to the starboard. At any rate, he called our master engineer, Gary Poole, came down. They took a look at everything. They ran a few quick diagnostics and it started working again. So they loaded vehicles and they started to transit with the engineer on board to the Gooseberry Point side, at which time they lost the number one end rudder again. So there was no steerage from that end of the boat, which makes it pretty tricky to handle. Captain Kent was able to make a safe landing into Gooseberry Point. They unloaded traffic. They called me and notified me about what was going on. Well, they had already done that, but it was hoping for the best. At any rate, that's when we went out of service the first time. And when we did that, I called, we call all the regular channels. I called Marie, our information officer, to get the message out right away. We notified the mechanics to get help on the way. And when I say mechanics, I mean the Whatcom Public Works mechanics. At any rate, at that time, then also engineer Gary Poole and assistant engineer Kent Dixon made contact with our Hamilton Jet representative. He's our technician that works on our steering system. He was actually on a camping trip with his family, but was able to give Kent and Gary exactly step by step of what to do to diagnose what could possibly be the problem. When the Public Works mechanic showed up, he jumped in and started assisting as well. And then throughout this process, all of a sudden the steering started working again. So they loaded vehicles and we thought, hey, problem fixed. We ran these diagnostics. The computer sorted itself out and we're good. So we took off from Gooseberry Point, headed back for Lummi Island. I contacted Marie Duckworth and said, hey, we're good to go. Then upon approaching the Lummi Island side, after leaving Gooseberry Point, thinking we had it all fixed, both rudders failed. Just as Gary was coming into the dock, both rudders failed over hard. And the way they got it down, actually got it into the dock, is Kent Dixon going into the engine room and manually forcing the hydraulics to to command the way we needed them to get into the dock. So at that rate, at that point, it was, game over essentially. So called Marie again, got the word out again that we were down. Let's see. Finally got a hold of I combed my emails and finally got a hold of a Hamilton Jet salesperson that was on vacation in Hawaii. He managed to sound the alarm and get a Hamilton Jet technician on site to drive up from Seattle with spare parts and all his gear. I also then got a hold of a Marine technician, mechanic and electrical technician that resides here on the island, has his own business in Bellingham, asked if he'd be interested in coming to work for us on an emergency contract. He agreed. He went down to the ferry, which was on Lummi Island side. He lives on Lummi Island, so that worked out pretty well. He assisted Gary Poole assisted him in changing a rudder feedback unit in the steering system, which is in the number one end of the boat. There's each end of the boat has a rudder feedback unit in it. It's an electrical device that kind of commands and relays information from the steering room. So at any rate, this mechanic changed out the rudder feedback unit. They were able to get over to Gooseberry Point, where they met the technician headed here from Seattle. They changed out their other rudder feedback unit because it had also gone bad. And we were back up and running about 11:15 p.m. Typically, we would have, we always carry one rudder feedback unit in reserve, because with the old system, the analog system, those two ends don't talk to each other. But with this new digital steering system, what had happened was the rudder feedback units do talk to each other from the number one end and the number two end. The rudder feedback unit in the number one end had been installed not well and had failed, and in doing so, polluted the other one on the other end. So at any rate, that's what happened. So in response, we added this gentleman who wishes to remain anonymous for now. He has his own marine business. He lives on the island. He's agreed to work for us under contract whenever we need him to on the ferry, which is great, primarily in emergencies. We added buying 2 rudder feedback units to our reserve stock out here for the island. So we'll always have 2 on hand. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, and when this local technician provides us with an invoice for the work that he accomplished that night, he's also going to provide a list of recommendations that we can implement at dry dock to ensure this doesn't happen again. So in short, or in long, I should say, that's the long story that occurred that night. As far as having floats, does everybody still hear me? Just I've been talking for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, sorry, thank you. As far as installing floats at our terminals, that's a conversation that's been going on for a while. There's a lot to be gained from it, as we were highlighting earlier this evening. At this time, we were planning on having all those internal conversations starting pretty much within the last few months, up into in preparation for bringing on the new vessel and the terminal improvements. And I think it's worth noting, though, that even if we had currently, as we sit right now, if we had a way to launch and put floats in the water, those floats still would not be available to personal vessels. They just wouldn't be unless they were under contract by Public Works with somebody that maybe had a 100-ton license or a 6-pack license that was licensed and insured to carry passengers. We could do that. But what would be handy about that is if we had the floats that went in the water directly and we could find a way to make that work, then in a service outage such as this, our passenger vessel that we contract we have him on emergency standby, so we could call him and he could just simply rush here from Bellingham and start carrying passengers. Now, as far as where the Wacom chief would be sitting, you know, and how that would look, I don't know. You know, would we just say, okay, the ferry's been broken for 4 hours. It's time to get a tugboat and tow it to Bellingham and get the passenger vessel up here and start taking people back and forth? Perhaps. I mean, it all comes at a great cost. So I want everybody to remember that as well. At any rate, that's where that conversation is at.
I'm
currently.
sorry. Can you repeat that and make sure I'm very clear about what
Sure.
you were just saying in terms of contracting with whom and a term?
Sure, I'm sorry. So in other words, if we did have floats currently and we put them down and they were connected to our terminals and they were owned by private vessels, wouldn't be allowed to just pull up and start loading and unloading passengers there.
Okay,
I know that for a fact. So, but however, if they were there, we could call and contract our emergency passenger vessel, and they could get here from Bellingham really quick and start providing service. I guess that's what my point was. Right now, currently, the reason there's this sort of like, you know, if there's an unplanned outage that occurs that becomes a longer outage than anticipated, you know, then it's like we start having to have the internal conversation at Public Works. Well, when do we call it quits? When do we launch the floats? When do we contact the passenger vessel to start providing service? Because all of that's going to take about 12 hours to get up and running. So if the tides are working correctly. So,
and in this last occurrence, though, there would have to be previous contracting with Chris Emmer for him to use something like that, right? Is that
correct. And Chris would have to have the appropriate licenses and business and all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, but not to say it couldn't happen. I mean, I'm just
Right.
making sure it's clear.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on that subject?
You say appropriate licenses. Is it a question of liability or insurance?
Yes.
Or
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm an old maintenance person. And so we're I know we do this lovely maintenance frequently. So that's just the kind of stuff that I like. What do we have on hand? Who are the people that are there? And I know, Richie, I know you got all this under control, but it's just like you know, those of us who are, especially like Mary, who was stuck, is like, what the, you know, what? So just wondering about that, all that, and there's just, is there some coordination we need to do with Public Works or whatever? Sorry.
No, don't apologize. As far as, sorry, just so clear, MJ. So as far as what your next step should be, as far as communicating with Public Works, as far as a desire to have a floats put in sooner than later.
It's just not the floats. I mean, it's just total,
Oh.
the total maintenance stuff. I mean, do you have the parts?
Yeah, I mean that.
You know, that's the whole thing that I see is the problem.
It is, and it's the whole thing that I see too. But believe me, I mean, we've been 90% of the time when we've had an unplanned service outage, 90% of the time it has to do with those super pesky rudder feedback units. And when we upgraded from the analog system to the digital system, those rudder feedback units were supposed to be of a much more robust quality. And I believe that they are. I just don't think that they were, well, I know that they weren't, they were installed in a hasty fashion that if you're standing from the outside, they look fine. But once you start taking them apart, there was a lot of things that didn't go well.
Okay, so there's some assembly stuff, and then are there spares? And now you said there were spares on.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. So just to recap, because I know I was saying a lot and pretty fast.
No, you were doing fine. It's me.
But just to be clear, like what we've done to ensure that this doesn't happen If it does happen, it would be for a much shorter period of time. I mean, the goal is for it to never happen again, but also the goal is to prepare. So if it does, it doesn't happen for as long, right? So we added an emergency marine service contract for a gentleman that he's a marine technician that owns a business in Bellingham. He's a super talented guy. He also lives on the island. And so we've retained his services as a consultant if we need him, or to come down and help us in an emergency if we need him. We also bought and procured 2 more rudder feedback units. So we'll always have those critical spare parts on hand.
On the boat. On the boat.
Correct.
Okay, that's where I'm going.
Yeah, you bet. And also we incorporated into Gary's, he's our engineer. He does a 3-week maintenance every 3 weeks, changes oil on everything, does all the filters, inspects everything. And we added a few things to his inspection sheet as well, specifically for those rudder feedback units. And then also the technician that we hired from the island to come down and help us, and whose services we are going to continue to retain. He is going to provide us with a whole list of recommendations that we can implement at dry dock this year to furthermore help ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Okay, I have one more question, and that is just because I'm an old maintenance person. Do you do, sorry, I appreciate you laughing.
No, I'm not at all.
No, I know, smiling. Okay, so, I mean, do we have preventive maintenance, what we would in the biz called PMs? Do we do that kind of stuff, or I know you guys, there's always something to be fixed, this and that, but
Sure.
But you've got regular PMs that are doing
yes.
all this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good.
I'll be quiet.
Mike, you had one more question.
For the minutes, and I apologize if everybody else knows, but MJ in my world is Michael Jordan. I need, who's been talking? Who's MJ?
It's Mary.
On the screen, it says MJ.
Mary Jane Van Hosen again.
Thank you.
It's just because I have all these computers and you can't see my face. So it's off to the side.
It's okay. I didn't show your name either. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Rich, we've got a lot of work to do on the replacement ferry. Can you speak to that too?
The only thing, the only thing Roland left me with was that obviously everything on the 7th went great. I know that that's just slightly further down in our agenda, but he just wanted to impress upon everybody how gratefully crowdfunding's on schedule. Everything is on schedule. So that's really the only news I have to report from Roland.
Okay. How about grants and the grant is on schedule to get submitted in September, but I know Mike, you were in Mike McKenzie, you were in conversation with Marie and Roland and so on about letter writing. And do you want to speak to this follow up to August 7th and getting a letter to Buttigieg and other letters? Do you want to speak to that?
If the time is appropriate, sure.
Sure.
So what I'm working on after talking to Roland, Liz, and Marie are some template letters that we can find places to make available to the public. They can edit a letter, they can to personalize it a little bit or whatever, print it and mail it. In addition to that, I talked to Roland at length about this, is that we're going to issue a personal invitation to Secretary Buttigieg to come visit Lummi Island. And when I said that to Roland, he laughed. He said, "That's great because you never know." And he told an anecdote about one year Public Works invited the governor of the state and didn't ever hear anything. And then one day the governor walked in and he was on a business trip to Vancouver. He had that letter and invitation and he walked in to see how everybody was doing. Were you there, Reggie, for that?
I wasn't.
Yeah.
I know the story.
So anyway, that's the status of it right now. You know, a letter for each of the representatives for our area in state and US Congress, and an invitation to Buttigieg. And Roland said it's not urgent to start that right this minute, but we want to get it steamrolling so that when the decision time comes. He also shared the anecdote, and I think he did with us at one time because it seemed deja vu to me, but he was talking about Larson visiting Buttigieg. Larson is chair of the Transportation Committee, visiting with Buttigieg, came out of the office and the receptionist or, the administrative assistant was talking to somebody from Lummi Island and got all excited and said, Lummi Island, your name came up in a meeting with Buttigieg and Larson. And so point being that Larson's very well aware, and all of the reps are, well, I take that back. Roland thought 3 were, and 1 probably doesn't know where Lummi Island is, but that they're all very aware of these needs for the grants. And but we just need to keep nudging them, and the more people that write to them, the better.
Okay.
Can you be specific about who we're asking people to write to? Are 2 senators and congresswomen, or
I'll try it out of memory. I don't have it in front of me. Is that Ben, B-E-N-E, what's her name?
Oh, Del Benny,
Okay.
Susan
Benny.
Del Benny,
Del
Patty
Benny,
Murray, and
Murray, Larson, and
right.
one other.
Cantwell.
Maria Cantwell.
Thank you. Yeah,
Okay,
Cantwell.
so those 3 people. So how would the public
4.
get these letters?
I'm working on that. We'll have them available both online and in person at various places. And that's the plan I'm working
Okay,
on.
great. This sounds
So
great. Thank you.
I'm a Hoosier. Is there something I can do to talk to Mr. Buttigieg or whatever? I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Pete,
Pete.
We'll
Yeah,
have,
is there some way I can talk to Pete?
is there a way to talk to him? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, because I'm a Hoosier.
Well, yeah,
Hoosier. We're from Indiana. That's what we
call
I
him.
love it.
Yeah, call him.
Hoosiers.
Call him.
I'll call him. I will. I have no problem.
thank you. Thank you. Okay. So Mike, you're going to announce next steps and where to get the templates, and we can talk
Yes.
it up. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And I want to confer with Public Works on it, with Marie.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have Roland's input already and Liz's input. So,
I'm going to move on then to what Charles has been helping coordinate with Roland. Too bad Roland's not here, but he's on vacation, I guess, this week, and probably well-deserved. Charles, do you want to take us through where we stand on the onshore power assessment?
Well, first on the agenda is the LIFAC report on new ferry fuel consumption.
Okay,
That's
Start there.
next.
all right, start there.
And
You-
I don't have anything really to add because the report was sent to everyone. And I just like to see that it gets attached to the minutes. And there was also a back and forth email exchange between me and Roland. And I think there are 2, possibly 3 points, and others who've had a chance to look at it, please jump in. The first is that the chief consumes about 180 gallons of fuel a day during the summer season, less during the winter. And the new diesel battery hybrid is calculated by Elliott Bay to consume 186 gallons a day. So even though it's more than twice the size of the chief. So that's welcome news. It's to a degree progress towards our goal of carbon neutrality. The other point is that The Roland has several times said to me in previous meetings that he would like to see LIFAC take up the issue of ferry scheduling for the new ferry. And so some of the graphs and tables in that report would be useful because they compare consumption patterns with frequency of transit. And it's a little detailed, but let me just leave it to these two. The good news, the ferry consumption is less than we might have thought, and the work to be done on the scheduling.
Can I ask one question? I remember also at August 7th that Roland was saying, yes, we should start addressing the replacement ferry schedule. And what is the urgency of that? Does somebody understand?
That's a good question. I don't know. I didn't ask him. I think just that Roland is a go-ahead guy. So he wants us to start thinking about it. But as you can see from my email exchange, we're going to need his help or Elliott Bay Design Groups or Rich's help working with these data, so we better understand what are the trade-offs. For example, when the boat was in the design phase, we were told that a boat of this size could make only a maximum of 2 crossings each hour, rather than 5 crossings every 2 hours, the current capacity. So this sets a certain structure to it. And I think he just wanted us to start thinking about it.
Rich, and you might share this at an appropriate time back at Public Works. I truly, personally think there is, there's going to be a new normal. And even if we studied and tore apart all our ridership numbers now, I'm not inclined to put it on the agenda yet,
Yeah, I feel like you might be asking for my opinion on all of this. Are you?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. So I have some thoughts. One, I was thrilled to see
Oh yeah, I laughed out loud.
fuel consumption, the new fuel consumption numbers, because it's just such great news across the board for getting closer to carbon neutrality. Also for our budget as far as our fuel consumption goes, it's awesome news. As far as fuel consumption versus ridership, I mean, my sense of all of that is I actually sat down at one point and hammered out a schedule that was, I thought, pretty decent, because we also have to make sure not only that we're being conscientious about the fuel we're using, but we also need to be conscientious about the level of service that we've told everyone we intend to provide. So in short, Rayma, I think you're right, is, when the time comes, I think we can start all sort of sitting down and crafting this sort of interim, vessel schedule. When the boat shows up, we're going to have a pretty good idea of what we want it to do. We're going to dictate a schedule that we hope provides that, and get that thing into service and see what it does, and see what the community is like when it shows up, the new normal, all that business. And then also, if we do that for a period of time, we'll have real hard, conclusive fuel consumption data based around whatever this interim schedule is that we've mandated. And that's really when in my opinion, when I feel like we can really start drilling down on, maybe we do it for a year, and then we collect all this data. And then maybe that's when we start drilling down on things like seasonal schedules, see what the ridership's like. I don't know, but all I know is that it's all going to be really good news compared to what we got going on right now.
Exactly. Okay. And so unless we hear differently, I'm not putting the new schedule on the agenda anytime soon. We'll wait and see. I think we got ways to go, unless you can explain a reason that there's something I don't see here.
I'll make Roland explain it next time he shows up.
There you go. Okay. So thank you for that. And it was, and Jim,
Rayma,
Yeah.
I made a note to put it on the agenda for 2026.
thank you. Jim, you are really quiet here about the fuel consumption numbers we got from Elliott Bay. Are you comfortable with them?
No, I'm
You have
not.
not been. Okay.
I'm not comfortable with them because the numbers I worked out, and this was not with a hybrid, by the way. This was with a straight one, was that that particular hull, based upon the horsepower requirements, was going to be a minimum of about 210 a day. Now, there's one thing you got to be careful here. The daily average per year long of the Whatcom Chief is about 145 gallons a day. The new boat is going to be 100. If let's say they're right about the 186, it's going to be 186 gallons every day.
I thought both were computed for summer schedules, though.
Well,
but
the summer schedule is not going to make much difference, because if you look at when we did the high year report, we had a lot of people call us up, said, I like those 20-minute runs. He said, well, we're not going to get them. You're going to hit 30. Oh, that's okay. And so what we came up with was a 27 run per day. And instead of the 39, because the boat was bigger, keep more or less trying to keep frequency where it is now. And that's what people seem to want. And so the summer schedule in the winter, you might be able to crack a few more into the evening. And but other than that, it's going to be pretty much chock-a-block full. The new ferry is going to be, especially the morning, the afternoon, it's going to be on every half hour, and there's no room to add anything in that. And so I'm a little bit hesitant on this. We've done a little bit of outreach to Texas, and we're getting some numbers from them, and they aren't, they're higher than what they thought they'd be.
I'm sorry, numbers for what?
Yeah.
No, numbers.
The amount of fuel it burned, that similar ferry.
Okay.
And it was 28 car, not a 34. But so I think the jury's out on this, because a proper haul would have been about probably 140 a day average at 27 trips. And this hull is draggy. And that was one of the reasons I don't like it. And so when you take 750 horsepower to get it to 10 knots, where we can do it with 210 in the Whatcom Chief and 460 with the Haiu, I believe what they did was they tried to make a shallow boat, which they don't need to do. And that's where we became a cropper on this. There's an awful lot of flat wetted surface, and that's going to drag down. Or the other boats are more of a V hull, which is less wetted surface, more of a like a clipper ship. It's more of a cleaving the water type of hull.
Well, Jim, I just want to say thank you for dogging the fuel consumption numbers, because I think without your persistence, this would not have been revisited, and I'm glad we revisited it, and I appreciate that. Mike.
I need clarification, Jim. You said we are in touch with Texas. Who's we and who's Texas?
Bill Fox and I and several other people.
Okay. And who in either the state of Texas or who? I'm not sure.
They're port engineers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are running low on time here. Can we move on to point D, proposed onshore power assessment resolution?
Yeah, Mary, could you put this up on the screen so everyone could see it? It was distributed, Rayma distributed. Mary?
I can try.
Okay.
Oh, no, I can't. The host has disabled participant screen sharing, so Mary has to do it.
No.
Unless she disables that.
Well,
I just disabled it. You may share, Judy.
Hey, thank you, Mary.
Well, it's open. Are you guys seeing it?
Yeah, and can you either reduce it in size or put it side by side so we can, or maybe just scroll down?
Yeah. I think.
Maybe the last part is, oh, yeah, the last part, the whereas, well, now we can't read it. Why don't you just have it where the bottom of page 1 and page 2 are enlarged, because that's what the
Yeah, I
heart of
agree.
it is.
I agree. Right there. How's that?
Right. This is for discussion, and if there's not time enough this meeting, we could carry it over. To just encourage the county to keep moving towards their carbon neutral goal. And it asks the county, LIFAC recommends that the Whatcom County Council pass this as a resolution to ask the county executive to ask Public Works to commission a detailed technical and cost assessment of options to increase the supply of electric power at either or both ferry terminals, sufficient for future full-time operations of the new ferry. We learned from the Elliott Bay Design Group person at the event on Saturday that the boat consumes about 1 megawatt of power. So that's new information, but I suspect there's not enough power to charge the batteries. Anyway, we've talked about some of the technical options, including microgrid solutions, battery storage, and so forth. So this is just to get the county to start thinking about the next step. And notice the last line, the study should be completed on or before December 31st, 2023. That's to give the county 2.5 years. We don't want them to turn to this now when they're full bore trying to get the boat itself funded. And after it's funded, the contract's let. But the next order of business, once the boat is underway towards construction, should be to commission this study. And this is just to make sure that the objective doesn't somehow slip off the radar. I've discussed this with Todd Donovan and with Roland, and they think it's a good idea. Roland looked at this text and made some suggestions so that they're aware of it. So that's what it's about, and over to you.
And I have one other question, and maybe Rich, you can help me with this. I should have asked it earlier in the process. Do we know where the funding for this would come from? Or one of the reasons to pass a resolution now is make sure it's in the next budget cycle? Do you have?
Well, I can actually answer that because I asked Roland about it.
Oh, thank you.
That question. And he said that the county council, allocates budgets and makes money available all the time, every meeting for this, that, and the other thing. So it would be up to them to, at the appropriate time this is just a recommendation that they asked to commission a technical report. Once Public Works receives this request, they would have to go out for bids for the, design of requests for proposals, the same process as they did for KPFF, for example, get bids and then go back to the county council to allocate the money. So it's the same process as all the contracts that they sign.
I would like to add something, Charles, if
Mhm.
I may, is that I completely understand the will and the desire, and I think this is all worded very well. The only concern that I have about any of it is where exactly the county council would be allocating those funds from, because as we've seen, not only the design process, but also every nickel and dime that we spend out of the ferry fund, I gain more and more anxiety about the county council coming back and asking us to revisit fares. And I'm all for it. If it's going to be viewed as coming out of the ferry budget, it's really poor timing. That's all I would add to that conversation.
Okay, and which is why I asked. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's not, it sounds like in general, even Roland agrees, it's a question that does not need to be answered today. Because could be ferry lines are so long, ferry fund is just fine, but we'll see. And with this time frame, I think it is worth getting experts to chime in sooner versus later is my own personal thought. Judy.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed on this is in the last whereas, and then in the very last paragraph, we are asking them to include in the assessment both terminals. And I had thought that in other conversations that we had concluded that charging a vessel on Gooseberry side is not in the cards due to the EMS system that we have now. So if that is the case, is it worth spending money to evaluate Gooseberry Point shore charging?
That's a good point. And you're right, Judy, that's what we had talked about, because given all the complexities we on LIFAC have seen over the years at Gooseberry Point, and given the fact that the vessel spends the night here and crew are here, it would be far better just to charge on this side. And I assume that that would be the case. And I think that it's possible to do so technically. But the putting in on either side was not to prejudge somebody's judgment. The Public Works might, 2 years from now, when they take this up, decide they might divide the work into two parts. A simple study of comparing the two sides, and then on the basis of that, drilling down on presumably the Gooseberry side.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
So Charles, you would be in favor of leaving both terminals in the wording?
I'm happy to have it just on the Lummi side.
Okay, I would be
If that's-
too. I would be.
Okay.
I think that my understanding of the project, that is the key to answering the questions that need to be answered. And Judy, you'd be comfortable, obviously, or you wouldn't have.
Yeah, I guess, and I wonder if Mike Skehan has a comment on this. I guess to turn the thought around would be to go ahead and leave the request for assessment, which I think is what we're doing, to indeed evaluate both terminals, because I do wonder that if there is some very, very large impetus to figure out how to charge Gooseberry Point side, it would mean reevaluating EMS services. And I don't know that that's out of the question, but in our previous discussions, it seems like that has been a hurdle too big to even entertain. So
Sorry, Judy, I missed part of that. What was it about EMS services?
Oh, I guess I was just saying, sorry, sometimes my mic is very poor. What I guess I was trying to say is, I think there's two ways to look at it. Have we made the decision that it is not feasible to consider reorganizing our EMS services? Or is it worth assessing if, for example, the ability to charge on Gooseberry Point terminal is so exponentially better than charging Lummi Island side? If that were the case, then could that lead to the question of reevaluating our EMS?
And
or
when you
I
say
can-
EMS, you mean
emergency medical services, our current system.
Well, I think that there is no question that the boat has to spend the night on Lummi Island side. And there's no question that it has to be ready to go 24/7 with sufficient power.
Okay.
And
Then if,
remember, it will also continue to have diesel capability. So it's as backup to the
Right.
electricity.
okay, then if we feel that way, then I feel that we should remove the request for assessment for the Gooseberry terminal.
Okay. No, my belief is that if let's just take the case of that it was, I don't know, very, very much cheaper and simpler to charge on the Gooseberry side, that it would have to be able to be shown that it could charge between trips during the day, that the boat would linger on the Gooseberry side for charging rather than directly coming back as it does now, but it would come back at nighttime. But now we're getting into complex speculation far beyond any technical expertise I might have.
Yeah.
So maybe we just, you're right, keep it simple and just focus on beefing up shore power on the Lummi side.
Okay.
Other comments?
I have one. The one thing is that if you do send the boat over to Gooseberry Point to charge, you've got to keep a crew on board. And that could be pretty expensive to keep them there all night or other times too. I don't think we're going to have any supply. By what I'm looking, the Power Council and everything else, and the shutting down the coal plants, and now the current administration coming out and saying they don't even want gas plants, and they want you to they have a goal that within 15 years of you won't be able to have gas in your house anymore to heat and cook with, which has just come up in the last couple of days. I think this is it's, in my opinion, it's a dead duck.
Would you be comfortable if it was worded with just shore power evaluation only on the Lummi Island side?
Well, as long as it's free, as long as the report's free, I agree with Mr. Hudson that we don't need anything more coming out of the ferry budget.
Okay.
Somebody else wants to pungle up for it, that's fine. But if it's going to come out of the ferry budget, I do not vote for it at all.
Well, and it's not specified in here, so we can see it is asking for it. Mike, did you have any comments before we vote?
Were you asking Mike McKenzie or Mike Skehan?
Oh, I was asking Mike McKenzie, but you're right. You were invited to speak also, Mike Skehan.
No, that's fine.
No, do you have thoughts on changing the wording to Lummi Island side only?
That it makes a lot more sense.
Okay, thank you. All right. I move that.
But wait, excuse me, did the other Mike McKenzie, did you?
I thought she was calling on Mike Skehan. No, I'm comfortable if you change the wording.
Okay, so let me just rephrase it before Rema proceeds. So we would change, you notice that the last whereas and the now therefore paragraphs are identical. So we'll make the same changes both places. And it would then read to increase the supply of electric power at the Lummi Island Ferry Terminal to a level sufficient. Is that
Yep,
what we're talking about?
I think so.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, we're changing that at the bottom paragraph on page
Well,
one.
there are the two paragraphs that Roland said it had to be phrased this way, so the language had to be identical. So on page one, the bottom paragraph, the whereas the Lummi Island Ferry Committee and so forth,
I see.
to increase the supply of electric power at the Lummi Island Ferry Terminal. And the same change would appear in the final, therefore be it resolved.
Got it. Okay, is everybody clear?
And on the question, I hear what Rich and Jim are saying. Todd Donovan is actually in the air flying to Europe right now, or he would be here. We could ask him about the financial implications of this. Or we could change the on or before date to further into the future to give it more flexibility. I mean, I understand Jim's concern, and I'm wondering if either or both of these are ways, or we just go ahead.
I believe that we ought to have the resolution out there that this is our wish. And if it turns out for some reason it does not make sense in the future, I do think that there's enough at play in terms of efforts to go carbon neutral and so on, that it is not out of the realm of possibility that there could be funding in multiple places. So I don't want to guess that isn't the case. And I want to make sure, kind of like our own ferry, that we are ready with an approved resolution. I would be most comfortable going that direction. Other thoughts?
Mike?
Well, tell me if I'm missing something, but to me, this is consciousness raising. So let's go.
Okay.
Okay. Can I just add that I like Raymond's points. In a way, this is yet another evidence for the people we would like to pay big bucks for our ferry, that we're with them on a carbon neutral agenda. Secondly, this is as Mike says, consciousness raising. That's also consciousness raising with county council. It
Right.
gets them to remember that they passed a resolution back in 2017 with a carbon neutral goal in it. So I think these are good arguments, and thank you, Raymond and Mike, for making them.
Okay. So I move that we adopt this resolution with those two very minor changes, that we increase a cost assessment of options to increase the supply of electric power at the Lummi Island Ferry Terminal to a level sufficient for future full electric operations, in both the last paragraph on page 1 and the final resolution. I so
Right.
move.
Yeah, someone has corrected it on the first paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay, and the second on the second. I second the motion.
And we vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I do.
Okay. So the motion carries to send this to County Council for their consideration. And thank you for the discussion. Let's move on to public awareness. Next tome deadline is September 10th. And thank you very much for making that happen at the last issue. I appreciated that. Thank you, Judy. I would like to suggest, Mike McKenzie, that since you were coordinating with Marie and so on, that you put together a draft for that tome article based on how far we get in terms of letter writing and so on. Would you mind taking on the responsibility of, did we just lose Mike? No, there you are.
I'm listening. You're saying tome article?
Yeah, would you take on
Yeah.
the tome article, because you could then make sure it aligns with the letter writing campaign and wherever we are in terms of getting out there with that. Do you mind being responsible for that September 10th deadline?
I'm glad to do it. I'm not sure that Is it September? Oh, because there isn't one in August. Okay, yeah, no
Okay.
problem.
And then just, yeah, try to make sure all those moving parts work together. And
Right,
appreciate
right.
that. Thank you.
Hey, can I make a suggestion
Sure.
for the next home article? I think that we, either for Zoom or otherwise, that we're getting many more people coming to our meetings, which is always good. Could we include in the next home article, if you'd like to come to our meetings, you know, here's where you sign up for the announcements. So we could expand our announcements email list. I'm not sure people know they could get on this list. And if they do, they could come to our meetings, whether they're Zoom or in person, and other events, and read the minutes. And in general, it's easier to respond to it, open an email, than it is to remember to go to the county website 2 months later to read the minutes.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Okay. So noted. Thank you.
Good.
Other thoughts? Okay. I move that we have worked our agenda, and I look forward. Thank you all for good work. There's a lot of good work that went into it. Thank you, Rich. Get better. Charles, thank
It's
you
just
for all the
ending.
heavy lifting, and be well. See you next month.
Okay,
Thank you.
See you next month. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
bye.